Ernie Irvan's triumphant return to Winston Cup competition, the return of a hero. Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Despain. Welcome to a momentous motorsports weekend here on ESPN and ESPN2. It is the weekend in which Ernie Irvan completes his miraculous recovery and returns to Winston Cup competition. A year ago, driving the Texaco Haviland number 28, Irvan had the Winston Cup world by the tail, winning races, contending for the championship. And then, in a disastrous split second at Michigan International Speedway, the championship was forgotten, and Irvan began the battle for his life. The 13 months since stand as a tribute to one man's courage, determination, and indomitable spirit. And in the next half hour, we will review that heroic struggle. Alan Bestwick is our guide, and we begin in the summer of '94.
By the summer of '94, Ernie Irvan was looking like a man who could dethrone six-time Winston Cup champion Dale Earnhardt. Irvan and Earnhardt battled hard for the top spot in the Winston Cup point standings. Through the first 20 races, Irvan had won 5 bush poles, finished second in 6 races, and parked the 28 car in victory lane 3 times. Following his second-place finish at Watkins Glen, Irvan was just 27 points behind Earnhardt, and the two drivers were poised to give racing fans one of the most memorable Winston Cup finishes in NASCAR history.
You know, the season was going great. Me and Earnhardt were having a great battle, and, you know, then all heck broke loose.
On August 20th, during practice at the Michigan International Speedway, Ernie Irvan found himself fighting not against the clock for qualifying position, but fighting for his life. While coming out of turn 2 at speeds over 180 miles an hour, a cut tire sent the Texaco Haviland car hard into the wall. Irvan was airlifted to an Ypsilanti, Michigan hospital with severe head injuries and collapsed lungs. The prognosis was not encouraging. Doctors gave him only a 10% chance for survival.
I'd just been out there running with him on the racetrack, and my car was better than his at that time, and I thought, well, that's just their luck. They'll pull their backup car out, start last, and, you know, blow everybody away. Yeah. Was my first response. And so we're pushing the car in, and I, you know, heard the helicopter start to fire, and I just sunk, you know. I mean, I didn't have any idea. That was the beginning of quite a long, tough time for me and for a bunch of other people, too.
The situation was almost too unbearable to think about. Just months after losing 2 drivers at Daytona, the sport was once again paralyzed. Once again, trying times for people tired of having their faith pushed to the limits. Times especially tough for Ernie's wife, Kim.
It's just like you live in a tunnel. We were in the hospital, and the hotel was attached to the hospital, and I never went outside for 18 days, you know, outside of the hospital. And it's like I lived in a tunnel, and every day I got days and nights confused, and, you know, just time was not an issue. It was tough.
The next few days, family, friends, and fans could do nothing but pray, have faith, and hope for the best for Ernie Irvan.
You didn't have proof, you just had to have faith. You didn't have proof he was going to be okay. You just had to have faith. When I saw him on Wednesday, I had all the proof I needed to say, Ernie's going to be back 100%. Ernie Irvan. And from that time on, I had the proof. Before that, I had faith.
Mark speaks of his second visit to Irvan's bedside the Wednesday after the accident, a pivotal and turning point day. In a desperate attempt for any glimpse of hope, wife Kim decided to place a booty in Ernie's hand from their little girl Jordan. And miraculously, something so tiny placed huge hopes in everyone's hearts as Ernie moved his right hand.
When he does come to, you want him to see a lot of familiar faces, familiar things, familiar items. You know, so we put pictures all over his room of the family and our horses and Jordan, and we put his shoes up there, and I thought, well, let's just put that shoe in his hand. And we worked it in there, you know. It was like, and then like when he did start moving his hand, he would start clutching onto the shoe, you know. And he held on that shoe, I guess maybe, I don't even know how many days. I can't even remember now. But he held on till he finally started really moving around and stuff.
Ernie Irvan's survival of his Michigan injuries ranks as a medical miracle, but as his fans have learned since, this is a man of many miracles. Return of a Hero continues in a moment with the long road back to Winston Cup competition. Racing, like so many others in Winston Cup, is headquartered in that hub area around Charlotte, North Carolina. And that area is now home for Ernie as well. Returning home from the hospital, home to Charlotte, was a major first step in the long road to recovery. Once again, Alan Bestwick.
For Ernie and his family, trying to get well at home made a lot more sense than getting well in Michigan. But returning to Charlotte meant a lot more than just resting in his living room. Returning to Charlotte meant coming back to the NASCAR-hungry media in the Carolinas. Ernie's support group planned to keep him away from all the media for a while as his rehabilitation got going. But showing a flash of the Irvan we knew before the accident, Ernie sidestepped PR man Brian Vandercook's protective shield and went public by telephone on the John Boy and Billy Show, a popular Southeastern morning radio show.
Brian actually walked in when I was on the radio, and I was on the phone, and I kind of like held the phone to my ear and said, "Brian, John Boy and Billy." And Brian kind of went, and he kind of just walked off. And he went over and he instantly called Libby, at the secretary here at Robert's shop, and called her and says, "Did you give the number to Ernie to call them?" "I don't know nothing about it." Libby says, "I just heard it on the radio."
As Ernie continued his recovery, he became more visible and eventually returned to the racetrack at Charlotte a mere 8 weeks after his accident.
Being back at the racetrack just meant a lot, and you know, this is the place that I like being. This is like home to me. I feel like we've made leaps and bounds in the last 40 days, and sure hope that the next 40 days I can do the same.
The more time Ernie spent around his buddies at the track, the more he missed the sport, and the harder he had to work to make it back. The rehab process was long and grueling, but anyone who witnessed Ernie at work will tell you an amazing story of determination. Anything Ernie had control over, he worked extra hard at. Just a few months after the accident, Irvan was in the best shape of his life, working out every day, sometimes twice a day, always with the same goal in mind.
The healthier you are, the better you can heal. And so I took that philosophy and said, hey, you know, there's something I can do to make myself get better. You know, now God's the one that's going to look at you and really make you heal, but if I can make myself healthier and do everything I can do to be able to someday get back into Winston Cup racing, that's what I wanted to do. And I started working out pretty hard. And you know, I still think every day when I get done working out, I'm like, man, I should have worked out harder, you know. And as long as I keep those thoughts in my mind, then I'm going to keep trying harder and harder.
Rehabbing in the gym is one thing that Ernie had control over, but healing an eye with double vision's a totally different story, one that Ernie couldn't help much no matter how hard he was willing to work.
Really, there wasn't a whole lot you can do for that. You know, they had one girl that was a specialist in that area to show you some sort of things that you can do as far as some sort of an eye exercise. But then you talk to one other eye doctor and they say, there's nothing you can do. You know, you can't exercise your eye to make it better. So, you know, that's one of those things that's really not a proven fact. And, you know, so they showed me some things to do. I mean, I really haven't seen any results from any of the stuff.
In the meantime, the Winston Cup season was ready to start up. The Robert Yates Racing Team hired Dale Jarrett as driver of the Texaco Haviland Ford. Irvan forced to sit and watch as his team continued on.
It's something that was real hard the day that I knew I wasn't going to be able to start the Daytona 500, which was, you know, obviously in late December. We already kind of knew that. So it's been hard from that day on.
While the Yates team went on with Jarrett, Robert made it clear to Ernie and everyone that if he were ready to race at any time during the 1995 season, there would be a race car waiting.
Ernie understands the situation. He wants us to go out and win races. Awful tough situation, but he wants us to win races and for a car to be there when he does get back. And, you know, sometime later this year, Ernie may be racing Dale to the victory. That wouldn't be bad. We'll figure out how to handle that, and I hope that could happen later this year.
While not able to drive, Ernie still wanted to be as close to the sport as possible and found the opportunity when Mark Simo, owner of the No Fear clothing company, offered Irvin a partnership in a NASCAR Super Truck team. Building the truck team was an opportunity for Irvin to prove some things to his detractors.
The Super Truck was something that I think I could show to everybody that, hey, I'm mentally capable. I'm able to do a lot of things that people think that, oh, he's not going to be able to do.
But trucks were not enough. Being a consultant was not enough. Nothing was enough anymore. The itch had become too great, and during an off weekend between the Atlanta and Darlington races in March, Ernie Irvan decided to get back into a race car. But being back behind the wheel for the first time didn't draw the emotional response from Ernie we might have expected.
Because I'm not a very emotional type of person, I mean, it should have probably, I mean, it felt great, but I didn't show much emotion for it. It was kind of like it was a test session, you know. It was like I was doing it the day before, and all of a sudden I showed up the next day to do it again.
Ernie used his Busch Grand National car and promptly set a Darlington track record for a car with a V6 engine. From that point on, Irvan and everyone knew Ernie was on his way back.
His fans had come to expect miracles from the man as a matter of routine, and even the skeptics were beginning to take seriously Ernie's insistence that he would soon return to Winston Cup competition. But testing is one thing and racing is another, and some very large hurdles still lay ahead.
Ernie saw only one way to clear those hurdles: keep getting back on the track, which he did in several test sessions. Ernie tried his truck at North Wilkesboro in April, then climbed behind the wheel of a Winston Cup car for the first time at Road Atlanta in early May. The progress was coming so well that Irvan and the Yates racing team had their sights set on a return to racing sometime in late May. But instead of a racing comeback in May, Irvan made a return to the hospital for another operation. Ernie had a pseudoaneurysm behind his eye, something he'd known about for months, something the racing world learned about at Sears Point, as doctors operated in nearby San Francisco.
You know, an aneurysm, that's why we didn't tell a lot of people, because you're right. The first thing you think when you hear aneurysm is people don't live with that. People, you know, how terrible they are, and they are. But they called Ernie's a pseudoaneurysm, which is like a false aneurysm, and it's in a place, and the doctors told me, if you have to have one, this is the best place you could have one. And it's like, yes, it's very dangerous, and it's this, that, but it's not life-threatening. That was my main thing when they told me about the aneurysm. All I want to know is if he's going to live. You know, I don't care about the side effects. I just want to know if he's going to live through this.
Not only did Ernie survive, he and Kim were at Sears Point watching the race just 2 days after the operation. Now, only one problem remained: Ernie's double vision. And that problem would be solved by continuing to wear a patch over his left eye, just as he'd done in the early test sessions. So after a summer of hard training, on-track testing, and steady progress, Irvan went back to San Francisco to gain the approval of his doctors to return to competition.
Basically, the next day before I left that hospital, he told me, he says, well, he says he's pretty much going to say it's all right, you know. He says, so what do I need to do now? And it was like, wow. I told Kim, I said, did you hear what I heard? He says, yeah. And I says, did he not say that he was going to say it was going to be all right? Yeah. And I said, okay, well, what do we got to do now?
What Ernie did was submit all of his doctor's information to NASCAR, then nervously wait out a final few days.
The stress level in our lives for those couple of weeks was unbelievable, because it was either yes or no. That was it. It wasn't like the crash could have been yes or no. Well, we got over that part of it, you know. And then every step of the way recovery, we've dealt with it, and it's been positive. And then this was it. This was the bottom line, whether you do race again or you don't. And it was like a whole year had come to a screeching halt to find out if it, you know, if you've gone through all this and you still can't race, or if they're going to let you.
Finally, on Thursday, September 14th, just shy of 13 months since his accident, Ernie Irvan got the green flag to race again.
Here's the big news. Ernie Irvan this week got his medical clearance from NASCAR. That is a major hurdle that he has cleared, and that news sets the stage for next Tuesday's press conference, when Ernie will fill in all the details about when and where he will actually return to racing.
The plan would be to run the NASCAR Super Truck races at Martinsville and North Wilkesboro, plus a number 88 Texaco Haviland Ford for Irvan to try Winston Cup racing again, also at North Wilkesboro.
Well, that press conference marked another major step in the direction of Ernie's ultimate goal, the return to the wheel of this car. backed by the same owner, sponsor, and crew with whom he so magnificently challenged for the championship last year. When we come back, the next step, the return to competition. In light of all the odds that Ernie Irvan has beaten and all of the hurdles that he's cleared en route to his ultimate objective, which is, of course, the return to the wheel of the 28 car, it would certainly take more than a little rain at Martinsville, Virginia to dampen his enthusiasm. Ernie was all set to race last weekend in the NASCAR Super Truck Series by Craftsman event at Martinsville, Virginia. And in fact, when he went out to practice truck number 28, he was one of the fastest in the field. Unfortunately for Ernie, and for that matter for the rest of the truck competitors, showers intervened, washed out qualifying. Without any points to earn him a spot in the starting field, Ernie was out of the lineup. In fact, that race was postponed until Monday, and so too was the competition return, postponed until here this weekend at North Wilkesboro.
All right, Dave, Ernie, last week. For all, we talked about a roller coaster earlier in the show. For all the roller coaster you've been on the last 13 months, how much was last weekend at Martinsville a roller coaster for you?
Well, in one way, it was a really uphill battle, and then it was a downhill battle. But the big thing is, man, I've got all my clearances. I went to Martinsville, tested really good. We ran really good for getting ready to qualify. Hey, I'm not going to argue with the person that governs the rain. And, you know, it rained for some reason, and I didn't get to start the race and be in the race. And who knows what reason that is all about. But, you know, I'm just thankful that I've got all the clearances. We can go racing. And I know it's not going to rain for 40 days and 40 nights. He told us that it was never do that again.
Otherwise, you'd be building an ark instead of a race car.
Right.
Was there any temptation when you didn't get to run at Martinsville to change the plan for this week? Have you had any second thoughts about it at all?
No, there's never been a second thought about changing the plans for this week. But a lot of people don't really know what our plans are exactly, because our plans are to get ready for next year. And part of those plans is to run the truck, and then if we feel comfortable with the Winston Cup car, we run the Winston Cup car. And it's still the same thing. If we go to Wilkesboro and practice in the truck, qualify the truck, we're obviously going to have to get qualified for the Winston Cup race. And we run the truck race and still feel like that I don't know if I'm quite ready to run 400 laps of the Winston Cup car. Then, hey, we can run 100 or 150 laps, and we're not working for points or anything like that. And, you know, we can do that and make that as more of a test session. It's all to get ready for next year. And Robert and Texaco and Ford and Larry and everybody involved realizes that, you know, I mean, because if we try to jump 2 or 3 hurdles at one time, then sooner or later I'm gonna trip over one. So it's better to just be prepared. And, you know, hopefully I'm gonna go there to Wilkesboro and run the truck race, feel real comfortable, jump in the Winston Cup car and run the Winston Cup race and say, man, that wasn't no big deal. Well, you know, what was we nervous about?
Yeah. Will that be what the best outcome would be for you for the weekend? Would be to come away saying, what were we so nervous about?
Yeah, it really would. But, you know, I've got to keep an open mind to it, because it'd be different if I was coming back and going to race exactly like I used to race. But right now, there's one key factor. You know, I'm going to have to wear an eye patch because I have double vision. So that's the big thing that's different. And all my testing's been with an eye patch, and everything's really worked out good, but it really hasn't been in race procedure. And I got to keep an open mind to it and say, hey, you know, I don't want to run before I can walk, and I just want to take it and take my time and make sure that, you know, I'm going to be capable and do the good job.
We wish you a lot of luck. Tickled to death to be able to watch you on the racetrack again, and can't wait to see what happens here this weekend.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Ernie. When we come back, we're going to go live to Dave Despain at North Wilkesboro, find out a little bit more about how Ernie's making out today.